exasperates me to hear parents trying to drag their children away from picture books into what they think of as proper books, that's books without pictures. I think it's a great shame. I hear parents saying that to their children. You don't want a book like that, that's for babies, come and get a proper book. And I find that's an incredibly short-sighted way of looking at learning to read, because learning to read is, which is what they want their children to do, is actually about becoming, finding reading enjoyable. And I think most children find the reading of picture books, particularly with an adult, incredibly enjoyable experience. And adults also find it an enjoyable experience. It's a shared experience. It's a three-way experience, because I think that the reading of a picture book with an adult echoes the relationship between the adult and the child, in the sense that the adult is reading the words very often, the child is reading the pictures, and they're both making the connection between the pictures and the words, and it's that gap between the pictures and the word which is filled by the reader's imagination that makes picture books so special. I also think picture books are special, and not just for the very young, because it's the first art we see. Picture books are not like anything else. They're not proper picture books. I don't think are illustrated stories, and they're not stories with illustrations. It's something very, very different. It's something we will never experience anywhere else than in the form of a picture book. So I think it's a great shame that children are being pushed, particularly in Britain. I don't know about here in Argentina, but in Britain I think they are being pushed earlier and earlier to leave picture books behind, as though that's part of the process of education or becoming mature, to leave pictures behind and to grow into words. And of course words are incredibly important, but so are pictures. We hear a lot talked about verbal literacy, but not enough, I don't think, talked about visual literacy. Children need to, I mean, they are naturally visual, of course. They've grown up in a visual age, but those images are all moving images, computer games, films, CDs, television. And I think we're not valuing the process of looking. I mean, looking is incredibly, it's not just important, it's enjoyable, but it's something we need to, in a way, learn to look. I think you need only go into a museum or an art gallery and see how quickly people pass by paintings, or how they look at the caption on the painting for longer than they look at the painting. It's because we've lost the ability to look, which children do have. Children look at my pictures for much longer than adults do, and they find things that adults don't see, and they get excited about it. They're seeing things for the first time. I suppose we as adults get a bit blasé. We've seen pictures of people sitting on a sofa in a living room, and we turn the page, but a child will notice that the flower in the man's buttonhole is in the shape of a pig's face, for instance. So I think it's very important that children, all ages actually, are encouraged to read picture books. I think we very much undervalue what children can understand. As adults, I think we tend to think that children, particularly young children, are not capable of understanding complex issues, layers of meaning in pictures, and of course they are. Children are incredibly creative, incredibly bright and imaginative and enthusiastic. And sometimes, yes, the references may be missed by children who've never seen, I don't know, a painting by Raphael or Bruegel that I might include in my books. And in a sense, it doesn't matter if they haven't seen the reference, as long as the image, the element, that hidden image, or the image that is there to tell part of the story that the words don't tell, as long as that works within the context of the story. It doesn't matter that it's a painting by Bruegel. Of course, maybe later on the child will see the painting by Bruegel and make some connection, and maybe find that painting more accessible because they've already seen it in a picture book earlier. Interesting to find the reference and see how I've changed it, for instance, to compare before and after, as it were, and then maybe talk about why I've included that picture or why I've included that reference to a particular film. So I like to put in as much as possible. And not all of it will be seen, not all of it will be understood by every reader, whether it's an adult or a child. But as long as it doesn't get in the way of the story. I hate the idea of including a reference which will only mean anything to adults. I hate the idea of kind of winking over the child's shoulder at the adult reader like that and saying, do you get it, you know, isn't this clever? That's not what I want to do at all. For me, it's got to work in the story. And it's there to be discovered. And if it is discovered, that's fantastic. And if it isn't, well, maybe it will be discovered on the 4th or the 5th or the 6th reading. I like the idea of the reader coming back and finding things that they hadn't found before. I think I'd suggest that parents choose books that they enjoy, to look at as many picture books as possible and find a variety and a choice. So, and if it's a book that they enjoy, then they hopefully will transmit that enjoyment and make the experience of reading the book an enjoyable one for both the parent and the child. So that's very important. I'd encourage parents or people working with children to talk to the children, to make it a conversation. When we have conversations over picture books that we would never have in any other situation. It's very different. I know when my children were young, I read picture books to them every night, and then as they got older I started to also read stories to them, stories without pictures, and they work very well, but it's a very different process. It becomes a two-way process then. The parent is reading to the child, and that's how it works. That's the communication is one way. With a picture book it comes back both ways. The child will find things in the pictures that the parent hasn't seen, for instance. So yeah, I would encourage parents to talk to their children. Actually, I'd encourage parents to talk to their children all the time, actually. I think that's one of the, I'm not saying I was the perfect father, but I do think that it's a very important thing to do, to talk to children. And of course, there's incredible enjoyment to be had from talking to children as well. And not to think of children as kind of separate creatures to us. They're not different to adults. And I know when I go into schools, I really don't talk to children any differently to the way I talk to adults. Maybe if I'm talking to 3-year-olds, I might speak a bit differently. But as I've said before, children are capable of understanding so much. I'd encourage the adult to share the enjoyment of looking at the pictures with the child, not to just concentrate on the words, not to think, if I've read the words on this page, it's time to turn the page, because the child might still be wanting to talk about something that they've seen. So yes, that's mostly what I recommend. I think it's a very exciting time for new illustrators in picture books in Britain, actually. I think there's some really interesting new people coming along. There's a writer and illustrator called Emily Gravett, who's published, I think, 6 books now. She's still young. Every book has been brilliant. I kind of fear for her because she hasn't had a failure yet. I can't understand how she can keep producing these wonderful picture books. And so she's great. She used, I mean, nearly all the young illustrators, I think it's kind of a worldwide thing, they're starting to use kind of retro images, but in a modern way. So they look modern, but they refer back to the past, quite often to the 50s, 1950s. So they're using computers, but they're also using drawing as well. Another really good illustrator is somebody called Alexis Deacon, who I don't think has been published in Spanish yet, or at least not much. Fantastic illustrator, a little bit reminiscent of the early Maurice Sendak. But I think he's going to go a long way. Oliver Jeffers, who is quite well known here, his story is tremendous, his colour is fantastic. There's a lot of them actually, but a surprising amount of the new illustrators also write their own text. And I think that's quite interesting and quite a key aspect of them. Minnie Gray, another writer and illustrator, a young woman who also uses computers, but you wouldn't know it. It's not as though it's computers trying to imitate paint. They all like drawing and using colour too. But those are probably the main ones. But Sarah Fanelli, who's also I think she's half British and half Italian, and I think she's been very much influenced by European illustration.